Welcome to this special edition of Origins as we celebrate our 40th anniversary. That's right, the Origins television program premiered right here on Cornerstone Television in September of 1985. In fact, I used to run some of the old television cameras right here in this studio. I also worked in the control room in those early days of Origins. During today's program, we'll feature past guests hosted by our founder, Russ Bixler, and host emeritus, Dr. Donn Chapman. You'll notice some set changes we made through the years on Origins as we take you on a journey back in time. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's Origins 40th anniversary show.
Welcome to this edition of Origins. Hello, I'm your host, Russ Bixler. And on this program, we deal with the creation-evolution issue. And we have a very interesting guest today. It's Dr. Kurt Wise, who has a PhD in paleontology from Harvard University. Currently, Kurt is the Assistant Professor of Science and Director of Origins Research at Bryan College in Tennessee. Welcome to Origins, Kurt.
Thank you.
It's good to have you. What will we be discussing today?
We'll be discussing probably everyone's favorite subject in paleontology, dinosaurs.
Oh, wow, yeah. You get everyone's attention from 8 to 80.
That's right. What I'd like to discuss are some of the misconceptions that people probably have about dinosaurs.
Well, paleontology, that's right down your alley.
Yeah, that's right.
Or up your alley.
That's my forte, specifically invertebrate paleontology. So dinosaurs are in actual fact are slightly out of my field, but let's discuss some of the misconceptions that many people have that I've run into about dinosaurs. We can write a few of them up on the board and discuss them in turn. First of all, there is the misconception that some people, interestingly enough, don't believe that they're real.
That there actually were dinosaurs.
Yeah, there are many Christians who are teaching others that dinosaurs never existed. And there are people, because they feel that dinosaurs are a conflict with the scriptures, reject the existence of dinosaurs.
I've heard that too.
Okay, so
for centuries.
Yeah, that's right. And so I want to deal with that first of all, and I want to say that I've dug up a few dinosaur bones of my own. I've put a few together. I've had some experience in the field with them. They're found mixed in with mammal bones in many cases. Most people don't realize that, but mammals were living alongside dinosaurs at the same time. And if you doubt the existence of dinosaurs, I guess you would have to doubt the existence of the mammals as well. Secondly, there is the misconception that some people have that dinosaurs are slow creatures. That in fact, they are not very capable of rapid movement. You know, you have this traditional view that, you know, they're clodding through the swamp very slow, lumbering along, you know, and you've got a few movies that portray dinosaurs as a little more active, but for the most part, dinosaurs have traditionally been described as very slow-moving, dumb creatures. More recent evidence in dinosaurology is that every time we pick up take an old species and reevaluate it, study it very carefully, determine from the bones what muscles must have been attached to those bones, the approximate strength of the muscles, which can be deduced by the type of attachment it made to the bones. When we reconstruct this specimen and try to evaluate it according to our best understanding of locomotor dynamics, the same things people use in training Olympic athletes to maximize you know, their performance in the Olympics. When we use those kind of studies on dinosaurs, we conclude, amazingly enough, in every case that these are very fast-moving creatures, very capable creatures. Even the very largest of creatures, as near as we can tell, were very capable of very rapid motion. They are not cold-blooded creatures like our modern snakes and lizards that spend a lot of time basking in the sun in order to bring their body temperature up to the point where they can move around. Rather, these creatures are what we call warm-blooded. We are hot-blooded.
That has been a subject of hot discussion for a generation, hasn't it?
That has as well, yes. There's been actually the debate has not been over whether they're cold versus hot-blooded. We are hot-blooded, which means that we maintain a constant body temperature irrespective of what else is going on around us. That is hot-blooded. Cold-blooded is where your blood temperature is dictated entirely by the environment. But there's an in-between situation, warm-blooded, where you're large enough to keep your blood warm for very long periods of time, and yet you do depend on the environment to heat it up. It's never really been thought that dinosaurs were actually cold-blooded. It's always been thought they're at least warm-blooded, maybe even hot-blooded. The controversy is whether they're warm versus hot-blooded. And they're at least warm-blooded, which means at almost every instant of the day they are capable of rapid motion, of doing things.
And because they're part of the reptiles, people have always assumed that they were cold-blooded.
Because people had the misconception that they're part of the reptiles, they thought that they were slow-moving. And that's the third thing I can put down here. Most people feel they're reptiles, at least that they're somehow classified within modern reptiles.
And you see it in print.
Well, yeah, they're called giant lizards, dinosaurs, terrible lizards. Saur is a word for lizard. And as a matter of fact, modern reptiles have a very different skull structure, have a very different walking gait. You know, if you think of a lizard, you can picture a lizard as sort of walking with the legs out to the side, sprawling gait is what we call it, and they walk kind of like this, and they turn their body in order to walk that way.
Would you say an alligator would be a good example?
Alligator, a lizard. Okay, sometimes for short distances they can put their feet underneath themselves and run quickly, but then they go back down to the sprawling gait. We, of course, and mammals in general, walk with our legs underneath us. We don't sprawl out to the side, we have legs underneath us. So did the dinosaurs. They walked with legs underneath them. Many dinosaurs walked bipedally, just like birds walk bipedally, and we walk bipedally on two legs. Others walked on four legs the same way mammals do, in that with the legs underneath them. Quite different than modern reptiles. Furthermore, the skull structure, as I referred to before, is very different in dinosaurs than it is in reptiles. It turns out that dinosaurs are a completely different type of organism. Depending on how you define reptiles, you could say, well, if it isn't a mammal and it isn't an amphibian, it's a reptile. If you define a reptile that way, then dinosaurs are reptiles. But that is not the proper definition of a reptile. Modern reptiles fall into one particular group, particular skull structure, sprawling gait, and several other things, like cold-bloodedness. Dinosaurs have at least warm-bloodedness, possibly hot-bloodedness, a particular skull morphology that's very distinct from reptiles, and able to walk with legs underneath them. So very different type of organism. So they're not ancestral to modern reptiles. They're not really part of the same group as modern reptiles. They're a distinct group of organisms. Another misconception people have is that they're dumb. I mean, this has been taught to us. I can remember this being taught to me when I was in school, you know. They say, well, look at the Stegosaurus, you know, poor little Stegosaurus, the one with the plates down the back and the spines on the tail. Look at the size of its skull compared to its body. That would be like saying our body was operated by a pea-sized brain. And so, I mean, obviously a pea-sized brain couldn't operate a body as complex as ours without being dumb. So the dinosaurs must be dumb. Well, the problem with that sort of reasoning is that it assumes that there's a direct relationship between the size of the brain and intelligence. It is possible to innervate or get nerves to a muscle, a larger muscle, without using a larger nerve. And you don't need a larger control center in the brain in order to operate it. So the size of a Stegosaurus brain is larger than ours. Now, if that's the case, then maybe Stegosaurus could be intelligent. We don't know. Again, we don't know that relationship between size of brain and intelligence. But there's no reason to believe that dinosaurs are necessarily stupid.
We want to talk about dinosaurs and the origin of dinosaurs.
Where do we find dinosaurs in the Bible?
Well, Russ, I know that most people say the Bible doesn't say anything about dinosaurs, but it does. Let me point out the fact that in the book of Job, let me write this down here on the board, the book of Job, and that we find that in chapter 40, beginning at verse 15, we find the mention about dinosaurs. Now, you mentioned those terrible lizards. Dinos is a Greek meaning terrible, and the word saurus, that you see, means lizard. So we might say they're terrible lizards. Dinosaur. That name, by the way, was given to dinosaurs by Sir Richard Owen. He was a British paleontologist and anatomist. He was a bitter opponent of Darwin, by the way. And it was Sir Richard Owen in 1840 gave them the name dinosaur. Now, we don't find that in the Bible, of course, because the Bible was translated, you see, in about 1600. But this word dinosaur was not even invented until 1840. So, of course, we don't find it in the Bible. But I believe we find a description of dinosaurs in the Bible. That's found in Job chapter 40, starting at verse 15. We read about a creature that was so huge, he just thought he could drink up a river. Wouldn't even have to be in a hurry about it. He had bones like bars of iron, and it had a tail like a cedar tree. But that description does fit remarkably well, that of a dinosaur. Now that means that Job or his friends or someone close to him, his father or grandfather, had actually seen dinosaurs and were able to describe them, you see, quite accurately. We believe this indicates that dinosaurs and people did coexist. They were created on the sixth day of creation. And they did die out, of course. They died out, we believe, following the flood, because the conditions in the post-flood world were so drastically different than in the pre-flood world, where there was a worldwide mild climate, lush vegetation covering the entire world.
Lots of moisture, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. And you know, Russ, dinosaurs are a tremendous testimony for creation, because we do find their fossils on every continent of the world, some in massive fossil graveyards, and they are distinctly different in many ways. They have some very unusual structures. Now, if those things evolve, Russ, we've got to find a series of transitional forms or intermediates showing these strange structures evolving over hundreds of thousands and millions of years, if that's what evolutionists believe. That's what the fossil record should show. The fossil record does not show that at all. The fossil record shows that each basic type of dinosaur appears fully formed right at the start. There are no transitional forms showing a gradual evolution of these structures. Well, every kid knows what this is, of course. This is old Tyrannosaurus rex. The name means the king of the tyrant lizards. And we see why they call these things dinosaurs. Look at that. It's got jaws about 6 feet long, got teeth 6 inches long, and you know, you and I would make a mid-afternoon snack for something like that. Now, it is believed creatures like that ate meat. Now, we really don't know whether they ate meat or not. They seem to be equipped for it, Russ. And as a matter of fact, the Bible tells us the world was full of violence. And I think it was then you see that these animals, like Tyrannosaurus rex, that had the equipment for it and had the inclination to do it, began to eat meat.
You're watching our Origins 40th anniversary television program featuring past guests through the years, hosted by our founder, Russ Bixler, and host emeritus, Dr. Donn Chapman. Now back to more highlights.
Did dinosaurs coexist with humans? And what's the difference between a dinosaur and a dragon? And could God have created both of them during the 6 days of creation? Our guest today will tackle this interesting subject with surprising evidence that may deliver a substantial blow to the secular worldview. Coming up next, Dragons or Dinosaurs, Part 1, with Derek Isaacs. Hello, my friends, and welcome to Origins. My name is Donn Chapman. It's my privilege to be your host. You know, Origins is a forum where we take the evidence of science and we use it to validate the truth of creation. Today, our guest is Derek Isaacs. Derek is a fascinating young man. He's written 3 books, and he's been on the speaking tour at creation events, and we're really thrilled to have him with us today.
The reason I wrote the book, Dragons or Dinosaurs, is because evolutionists use dinosaurs more than anything else to deceive children about the theory of evolution. You know, you hear it, it's inundated everywhere we go. It's in movie theaters, it's on radio, it's in airports, wherever it is, they push this idea, this fallacy that dinosaurs were separated from man by like 64 to 65 million years. And of course, that attacks the basic truth of a 6-day creation. And so I wanted to write a book to give an answer for the body of Messiah, so that when people hear dinosaurs died out millions and millions of years ago, we now have a strong biblical defense why that is not the case, and the truth of God can be trusted from the very beginning.
You know, you're absolutely right. As a pastor, I'll have parents pull me aside and say, you know, my kids come home, what about the dinosaurs? Like, there's no answer. And so I think our show is going to be very important for everyone, especially for parents and for some kids. All dinosaurs are not purple, is that true?
That's right.
Okay. So tell us about what does dragons have to do with this?
Well, there are stories in virtually every culture around the world, from China to South America to Europe to Australia, everywhere, these big scaly reptiles that may just gnaw your face off. And that's what these stories were. And when you compare the dragon of history to what we know the dinosaurs were, you know, there's a lot of similarities there. And so what I did is I went through and went through history, went through all kinds of things, and showed that the stories of dragons very much match up to what we know about dinosaurs. And that's what my book and DVD is about.
All right. Well, you've done some research in the field. Will you tell us about that?
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, I'm going to head up here because this is where it all started for me. I did a dinosaur excavation in Glendive, Montana. It was one of the highlights of my life. And this is you in the picture? This is me in the picture.
I got to tell you, you've cleaned up real well.
Well, thank you. Well, I'll tell you why. The reason I'm so dirty here is that for 10 days, we lived out in the middle of nowhere with no showers or running water. Now, can you imagine some guys living in tents for 10 days without running water?
I can.
Okay, we discovered all kinds of new smells.
I'll bet you.
All right. But this is the terrain we had to go through to get to this place.
This is where?
Glendive, Montana.
Okay.
It was 25 minutes off of a road, and we went through these canyons and crevices and all that to get to this point. Now, where the dinosaur was that we were excavating is on top of this kind of cliff right here, and it just didn't die in a convenient place for either one of us, I guess. But we had to climb that and traverse that every single day. And then this is what we were doing is we're excavating it. We put a tent over the excavation site because we wanted to protect what we were uncovering, because like if we got a flash rain or anything like that, water is devastating and it remaps everything. Now, the type of dinosaur that we were digging up is like a Triceratops. It wasn't a Triceratops because it had very unique frill features, but this is it. And his name was Big John. His name, we called him Big John because he was big, he was huge, he was like 34 feet. From nose to tail.
Okay.
So it was one of the biggest ones found. And John, well, that was the name of the guy who found him. So if you dig up a dinosaur, that's how it works. You can name him anything you want to name him. You can call him Dinosaur Donn if you want.
All right.
You name him. Now, the kind of pieces that we were picking up were found in this. And if you notice, right here is the actual fossil, and it was embedded in rock. And so it was in that piece, to give you a concept, was about yay big. And so he was all these pieces, and we were just putting them together like a jigsaw puzzle, and we were carving them out like that. And then these things go to a lab, and they chisel out the rock real carefully. And when you get to the museum, it ends up in something like this. Now, the fossils that are in the field don't usually make it to a museum because this is a plaster cast. But the question is, we see pictures of dinosaurs with their flesh, with their skin, with colors. How do we really know what these things look like? Well, we do know what their skin was like because we've had fossilized skin found. And so we know they were very reptilian, and we know that they were crocodilian in their exterior. This is hard evidence that we have. Now, this is an incredible tomb. It's in Carlisle Cathedral. Bishop Bell's tomb in the 15th century is where this comes from. And what I'm going to do is...
Is that in London?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay.
And I'm going to zoom in on two of the creatures that are in the carving around the edge of this. And what I'm going to show, there are two creatures here. And I'm going to zoom in on the one on the right, and then I'm going to place...
Are they fighting? Is that...
Well, they're intertwined. Their necks are intertwined.
Okay. There they are.
Here they are. Now, what I did is I put a sauropod underneath it. Now, what I want everyone to see is the ratios of everything. Look at the tail of both of them. Look at the tail. Look at the girth and the belly here. All right? Very similar. All right? The posture of the legs, the four legs, and the long neck, Now, you can't really see this in here because it's hundreds of years old, but the neck of this actually extends like this, if I can draw that in. And so by the time you see all of this, it's like they have drawn a perfect representation.
It sure looks like the guy
that
made that drawing had seen something like that.
Absolutely. And he didn't draw a fossil. He drew the actual bodily girth.
Right.
Which is very, very important. Now, here I am, and I'm in Utah at this point, over at Kachina Bridge, and where I'm trying to get to is underneath this bridge right here. And I climbed up because there was a petroglyph, a rock carving, there was a rock carving that I wanted to get to. And I'm going to zoom in real quick, and this is what that rock carving looked like A rock expert said there's a petroglyph in Natural Bridges National Monument that bears a startling resemblance to a dinosaur.
If we can show that human beings and dinosaurs live together, we collapse this billions and millions of year time frame that the evolutionists want us to believe. And it's all back to a young Earth game. That's kind of what we're working on, right?
That's exactly right. It's a very powerful apologetic to demonstrate that man and dinosaur coexisted.
So what have you learned from written history?
Well, written history is fascinating. That is what we're up to next. And what we know is we have three just heavyweights of history. You have Herodotus, the Greek historian of 400 BC. You have Flavius Josephus, the Jewish historian of 1st century AD. And then you have Pliny the Elder, the Roman historian of 1st century AD. And if you know your history, these are the heavyweights.
Yes, they are.
And all three of them deal with dragons, giant reptiles, flying reptiles, things that match the dinosaurian kind. And I'm going to take you directly to Pliny the Elder because what he says is absolutely extraordinary.
Okay.
He wrote, Ethiopia produces dragons, but not so large as those of India, but still 20 cubits in length. Now, what's fascinating to me, I mean, Pliny was not a purveyor of myth. He was a true historian,
right,
and he's speaking matter-of-factly about the dragons in Ethiopia.
And he's a Roman, and the Roman Empire had gone to Ethiopia and had gone to India, so they have first-hand eyewitnesses in both those places. And he's comparing dragons from two different parts of the empire.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's incredible. And if we were to believe that dragons are mythological, why is he using a cubit to measure their length?
Yeah, you don't measure legends.
No, it is absolutely incredible that this account.
And that's a fascinating account.
And then he goes on and he says this. The contest is equally fatal to both. The elephant vanquished falls to the earth, and by its weight crushes the dragon which is entwined around it. He's actually talking about what dragons are feeding upon. Now, what I'd like to do is go to paleontology, because you know, there are some people that just want something out of a laboratory. They just want something that's just from the field of science. Now, what we have shown so far is oral history, mythology, archaeology, written history, and there is one message to all of it, is that man did encounter some giant reptile that we would call dinosaurs today. Now, what would paleontology say to all of this? Well, this is fascinating, because back a few years ago in Montana, they dug up a T-Rex. And this T-Rex was not too far away from where we were digging up Big John. So I kind of know the terrain a little bit. But what was fascinating is this bone, this fossil that they excavated, was too large for them to get it out by itself. And so the paleontologists ended up carving and cutting the fossil in half, which is something that you never do, but they had to, just to get it out of the site. And they put it on a helicopter and they flew it back to their laboratory and they put the thing under a microscope. This is what they saw. They saw soft elastic tissue that when it was stretched, it snapped back to its original form. They found blood cells. They found fibrous tissues. They found everything that should have decayed, not in millions of years, not even in thousands and thousands and thousands of years, but things that should have been decayed in the last few thousand years.
Derek, as you've studied this, how old do you think this is?
Well, it cannot be any older than 4,000 to 5,000 years old.
Yeah.
It simply cannot.
Yeah.
Flesh decomposes. Everything we know about flesh is that it is rapid in how it decays and breaks down and is refed into our environment. Once this happened, the faucet, if you will, got turned on, because other scientists around the world said, wait a minute, if that is happening in that bone, let's take a closer look at our others. Once they found out that there was something there, more blood cells were being found. And again, there was a supposedly 80-million-year-old mosasaur fossil that had soft retina and blood residue that was discovered.
Derek, if our viewers are going to remember one thing from this program today, what do you want them to take away?
That the only worldview in history that confirms man and dinosaur coexistence is the biblical worldview.
That's right.
I hope you enjoyed this blast from the past as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Origins television show. Everything we saw today, in so many ways, confirms that we really do know what the Bible says is true, because the proof is all around you. If you enjoy Origins, we sure could use your help to keep this creation television program on the air. Your support, both prayerfully and financially, make a big impact. So let's work together to reveal how awesome our Creator truly is, and we'll see you next time right here on Origins.
This presentation was made possible by the faithful prayers and financial support of you, our Cornerstone family.